Well, let's just
Sorry,
got it.
I'm not. I'm
Nice.
just setting it up.
The early birds. We are still admitting folks, so you know, those of you that we've been doing Zoom for a good while now, just know how it goes. So let's give a few more minutes for people to be admitted. Thank you again. We'll start shortly.
Hi, Wally Courtney here.
Hey, Wally, one of our guests. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Wally.
We're waiting for one more guest. All right, let's aim for a start at 6:03. Hello, Rudy. Hello, Danette. Thank you all for joining us on this Thursday. We're still getting people, so this is great. So let's give more folks more time to log on. This is great.
George, I'm trying to figure out what's all that stuff in your background.
That is my wall of Funko Pops. I collect Funko Pops, so I have a couple rare ones.
Oh,
I don't have an office. This is my living room. So my living room got converted to an office, quote unquote, when everything went digital. So I made a fake wall to to block everything.
yeah, great.
I think David is here. Great. I think David was able to join us. If we can give David Duran access as a
Yeah, I just said it.
perfect.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hi, David.
Thank you, David. Hi.
All right. We want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know we still have folks joining on, so we still have a few things to get through. So we'll start. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this Thursday evening for this wonderful conversation. For those of you that don't know, I am Jorge Gavino. I am the president of the Anaheim Democrats. With me today is the rest of the board, and I do have to give a special shout out to Fred Sigala, who spearheaded this event and has worked very hard to put this together. So this is his baby. Thank you very much to our vice president Marisol Ramirez, who has worked to get all of our contacts together for our guests for tonight's event. Lindsay, who is running our tech, and Patrika Jamal, who is our roster secretary, who will be working with us to moderate the chat and the rest of the conversation. So, today is hopefully the beginning of plenty of conversations going on. This is our first event, quote unquote, of the year. Obviously, it's been a difficult year and it's been crazy in Anaheim, but we're happy that we're coming together. We're happy to admit that we're happy to say that our next meeting is going to be hybrid / in person, and we have a social coming up. So the Anaheim Democrats are here and we're ready to keep going, So with that being said, again, thank you so much for joining us. I know we want to start quickly, so let me hand this off to the force behind today, getting things together, Fred Sigala.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fred Sigala. I'm the treasurer for the Anaheim Democrats. I want to thank you all for being here. We have a really, really exciting panel of guests that are going to be joining us. We have an awesome moderator, Mr. Grant Henninger, who's agreed to do this for us. He's got experience. He's got the knowledge on the issue. Really grateful to him for being here. I'd just like to reiterate what Jorge said. We have a social coming up at Bruheim. It's on the 30th at 6 p.m. And it's also comedy night. So join us to unwind and have some of the best craft beer in town. Lastly, the council meeting. Our next Anaheim City Council meeting is coming up this Tuesday, the 21st at 5 p.m. We encourage everyone to come out and make your voices heard. Thank you all again so much for coming, and enjoy the show.
All right. So I guess that kicks it off to me. First thing I want to do, introduce myself. My name's Grant Henninger, as Fred said, and I think a lot of you know me. I ran for city council 4 years ago, and I am an affordable housing consultant. My day job is making sure that people get the housing they need here in Orange County and across Southern California. So I'm really excited to be able to be here tonight. So I want to thank Fred and Jorge and the entire board of the Anaheim Democrats Club for inviting me to do this tonight. And so first, I want to give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves. I thought I would start with Councilmember Moreno, but it doesn't look like he's unmuted yet. So there he is. So Councilmember Moreno, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good evening, Democrats. Jose Moreno, City Council Member District 3, which is Central North Anaheim, and Associate Professor at Cal State Long Beach, and a father of 4 and married to a school principal.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Wally, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Wally Courtney. I'm a real estate broker. Been working with Paul Cott Realtors here in downtown Anaheim for 40 years, if you can believe that. Because I don't feel like I'm even that old. But anyway, I graduated from Anaheim High School and have been very active in Anaheim business and more recently in politics, especially when the stadium issue came up. I was first got involved back when I think I saw an article in the Register when Chris Murray seemed to think that if the Angels would pay $1 million a year rent, that would be a good deal for the city. And I wrote a letter to the Register that got published explaining as a real estate broker why it's not a good deal for the taxpayers. And I've been involved with the stadium issue ever since and been following it very closely. So I think that's why I'm here today, to talk some more about what's going on at the stadium and what happened and what might happen.
Thank you, Wally. And finally, David Duran, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. But for the People's Homeless Task Force OC, we're going to do a little tag team with President Mike Robbins. So Mike, you want to introduce yourself first?
Let me find him here so I can unmute him.
He's incognito. He's listed as Janine Robbins today.
That's why I couldn't find his name. Thanks.
I am Mike Robbins, president of the People's Homeless Task Force.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Right. Thank you, Mike. Dave Duran, secretary for People's Homeless Task Force. And a little unknown fact, as a retired golf professional for over 30 years, I started my career at what is now Dad Miller's, Anaheim Municipal. I used to have to pick up Dad Miller at 102 years of age and bring him to the club and take him back home. That was part of my responsibility back then. And I'm not foreign to corruption. As a matter of fact, the head pro that was in charge there, one day while I was at work, officials came to arrest him for embezzling. So that was my introduction to Anaheim. Thank you.
Well, that's certainly an interesting introduction, and maybe quite appropriate for what we've seen over the past few years. So I want to just jump right into it, and First up, Jose, I want to ask you kind of a question, but I want to start it with a story, very brief. And you might remember back in 2019, I came and talked to you about a gas station project I was working on here in District 6, trying to get it approved for a client. And I talked with you and with some of the other council members I had good relationships with about the project, including Jordan Brandman. And when I met with him, he told me that to get his vote, I had to get the mayor's vote. And he was completely unwilling to even consider the project unless the mayor was supporting it. And I'll tell you, that was the last day I talked to Jordan. I haven't talked to him since. And I relay that story to you to, ask, how did the city council operate behind closed doors under Harry's leadership?
Well, I'll say that we now know, as many of us have known for years, that with the exception of some years with Tom Tate, that leadership in the mayor's office came from a self-proclaimed cabal. And I understand that actually turned to be quite a historically marginalizing term for some folks, but at the end, they call themselves as family. So it's a shadow government, I guess, that was playing out in Anaheim. And that's what I've seen, both outside of council and then since joining council, that clearly the votes up on the dais were predetermined, were scripted, and they were not moving away from that. And anytime that an argument or a perspective was shared that they weren't prepared for, you could see it in their faces. There was no discussion. They would quickly call for the vote, call the question, and quickly vote and get out of this as quickly as they can. So I'm not surprised that Jordan would have said that to you. I think at the time we talked about that. And I guess I'll just put in the context that with the previous mayor, Jordan was not supporting anything Mayor Tate wanted to do, because he often said, I defer to the mayor's office as the office of record for the council. So I'm just following the mayor. But he didn't do that with Tom Tate, certainly on the Angels deal, but he was doing what Harry said do. So I understood it just for what we now know to be true through the FBI. It's a shadow government of people making decisions on our behalf, and council members are there to basically pull the lever for somebody else's behalf.
So with relation to the Angel Stadium deal, there were a couple closed sessions that the council, had leading up to the agreement to the sale. And, I don't want to ask you, kind of what those discussions were like on that specific issue, but more kind of broadly, were there any actual discussions in closed session amongst the, cabal members?
No, and I said that the day of the meeting where we decided that in terms of in-depth discussions in that regard, no, but there were decisions made and direction given, and that's what I declared to the court, wherein Harry Sadu called it embarrassing that I would do that. Well, now we know why. So in that regard, no, in terms of discussions in any depth, but there is direction given and there are votes taken. And often without discussion, which now we know isn't needed when you've made the decision outside. And the discussion had already happened in the boardroom at the chamber or in some hotel conference room at the Disneyland Hotel or the Grand Hotel at Disneyland. But it certainly isn't happening at the dais, and the discussions are often not even really held in closed session either.
So that's interesting. And I think that's kind of what we all suspected just watching, the council operate over the past 4 years. That's certainly not a surprise to me and probably not a surprise to a lot of the people here. Kind of focusing more on the stadium deal. What we saw, Harry get elected in November of 2018. Just prior to that, the Angels had opted out of their lease with the city for the stadium. And at that point, they either needed a new lease with the city to buy the stadium or to find a new home. And then 6 weeks after Harry was sworn in, the Angels had their lease reinstated with an extended opt-out clause, to the end of 2020. And then towards the end of 2020, we saw this sale, go forward with for $150 million and some community benefits. Wally, I have a question for you, kind of with that as context, is, how did we arrive at that price for $150 million?
Somebody said hocus pocus, and that's what happened. Actually, to Tom Tate's credit, one of the last things he did as mayor was the Angels had opted out. So he asked the staff to order an appraisal based on the Angels not being in the property. How much is the property actually worth? Not subject to their lease, not subject to parking, but how much is the property worth? Then unfortunately, he was gone, Harry came in, and nobody had ordered an appraisal. So then when the pressure stayed on to get the appraisal, I think they ordered one again in January or February. And there was very specific instructions given to the appraiser that, oh, well, the Angels have this lease. So all we really want to know is what's the value of the land subject to the lease. And then we're going to base the new lease on the value of the land subject to the lease. So long story short, they came up with a number that then when the property became a sale, that should have been a whole new appraisal, because they were basing that previous number of 325 million or whatever it was based on the acreage subject to a lease, but now they're buying the property. So I actually I read the appraisal, and then I called the appraiser and asked him several questions, and he, gave me a runaround and said, well, it's not public available yet or whatever. And I said, well, I just read it online, so I think maybe it is public, but he didn't want to really answer my question. And then of course, we all know about the deductions for a park, which in my mind's crazy. And for the affordable housing, which 95% of any development in Orange County, the city already requires affordable housing. So those two deductions are questionable in my mind. And then I'll get off another tangent as far as value. Several people, including myself, spoke to the council and explained to them why that number they came up with, doesn't make sense. For example, if they're going to be building some apartments or condos on the property, the George apartment building on Orangewood, which is right immediately adjacent on the borderline of the Angels parking lot, they paid $4 million an acre for that land and then built that nice apartment complex. So that property is worth $4 million an acre, but if you walk 2 inches over, the parking lot for the stadium is only worth $1 million an acre. I don't think that's anywhere close to being correct. So it kind of worked its way backwards, but the most incredible part of the whole thing to me was they were using this 325 million number for the value of land that has a lease on it. Then last minute, they switched to a sale. And I have a copy of the appraisal right here, page 7, and it says the stadium improvements were not considered in this appraisal. So Artie Moreno is buying a parking lot for 325 million minus the deductions. And the city just decided, well, let's give them the stadium and the Grove for free, I guess, because that's not in part of the appraisal. So again, the numbers that were completely crazy. I argued twice, blue in the face to the council. Of course, they didn't listen. But to answer your question, where the number come from, who knows? Because I even questioned the appraiser again. How do you come up with an appraisal for a ground lease being on the property, and then all of a sudden they say, oh, well, we're selling it for 325. He says, okay, the appraisal is 325. What happened? What happened to the buildings on the property? Don't they have any value?
I mean, so, that's really amazing that it was based on based on an appraisal for sale of a stadium, and the stadium wasn't included in the appraisal.
Right. Yeah. Considering the Rams just spent about $4 billion to build a stadium. Anaheim Stadium, who people say, oh, it needs to be redone or rebuilt, they still get 3 million visitors every year. One of the top attending stadiums in the league. Can't be that bad. It's perfectly usable. Maybe it's worth a portion of what a new one's worth, but it's worth something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'd be interested to know, and Jose, maybe this, what is the stadium insured at as its replacement cost? If there was a big earthquake that knocked that stadium down, I'm sure the city has insurance on it. Maybe we self-insure, that's possible. But, what do we assume the replacement cost is? I mean, that should be the bare minimum of the sale price.
That's probably been the most underreported part of what is a really bad deal. Is that basically, as Wally just outlined, the stadium was never appraised onto itself. And so the argument at the time was that, well, if we put it out to bid, the stadium really has no use for anyone except for the use of baseball. So whoever were to presumably buy this land in the market would actually have to spend millions to knock the stadium down. So it actually devalues the land. That's the argument the appraiser made to us. We said, well, wait, but we're not doing a market sale here. We're not putting out to the market. It's a no bid sale with an owner, as Tom Tay would often say, with an owner that has one use to it and only one use wants it and has this negotiation tied up with themselves, and that's a baseball owner. So how much is a stadium worth to a baseball owner? And that was probably the most underreported part of the deal, is he got the stadium at no cost.
I mean, that's incredible. As much as I pay attention to this, I did not know that. So that's amazing. And Wally, I think I heard you mention something else in there, that the Grove Theater, and I believe the land around the Grove where the old Metrolink station was, also wasn't included in the appraisal, but it was included in the sale. Isn't that correct?
No, that property was part of this appraisal.
Okay.
No, the Grove was not. The Grove and the Grove parking, I don't believe, well, at least the Grove building was not included.
Right.
The land around the Grove probably wasn't included. But if I can go back, an argument that I had prior to all this even getting started was back in 2007, when the NFL was thinking about buying some of the land to build an NFL stadium, and the city didn't like the NFL's bid. They put that out for proposal because the city has the right to develop that approximate 50 acres where the Grove and the train station was, 50 acres over there. And Archstone Smith offered $200 million to take that 50 acres. So if you extrapolate that 20 years later or 15 years later with inflation, how much is that worth now to somebody? And that's just for a third of the property that they're selling for less than that. So there's some more background of, what probably should have been done this time was maybe the city should have pieced the thing out, say, hey, Artie, we'll sell you the stadium and provide some parking. I'm getting off on my own tangent here, if you don't mind. Samuelis, you're building all the way up through Catella. Why don't we let you take that Archstone Smith section?
Yeah, Wally, why don't
somebody else build a hotel in the corner and somebody else build what? So the city should be the developer. Why let a developer make $1 billion? Why doesn't the city make $1 billion?
So Wally, that's where I'm going to get to at the very end.
I'm getting ahead of us. I know
you are getting ahead of us, but so I think that's a good place to kind of switch what we're talking about a little bit, and bring in David. He hasn't said much yet. Regarding the Brown Act lawsuit. So David, can you provide a little bit of background there and kind of the future of that lawsuit? Oh, I think you're still muted. There we go. Nope.
How about now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So I think it's important, Mike, give a little history on what People's Homeless Task Force has been doing prior to the lawsuit, and then I can move that forward if that's okay.
Sure. Let's Mike, I think you can unmute yourself now. There we go.
Oh, gee, I can talk. I have to start this off with something. Janine and I became involved with public service thanks to our good buddy, the neighbor, Kurt Pringle. And when they changed the name from the Anaheim Angels to the Los Angeles Angels, that's when we got involved with him in working on forcing Artie to change the name back. So there are many things I did with Kurt related to that. And I thought you guys might find that interesting, since Kurt is not really on our side. He might even be, as far as we know, on Artie's side. So the People's Homeless Task Force began in 2015, and we were always fighting for the homeless people. But certainly at City Council, we saw the way things are being manipulated. And it certainly began with the triumvirate, Chris Murray, Jordan Brandman, and Lucille Crane, and all the money that Disneyland was putting into the election process. So we could certainly see that things are being manipulated behind the scenes in every way, shape, and form. It might have been something that Artie saw also, because in the election process of 2018, that's where we tracked a lot of money coming from Artie Moreno to the Mayor Harry Sadu. And that, of course, was the beginning of our pressure for the corruption involved. And our group, the People's Homeless Task Force, brought suit to stop the sale. And our opinion there is violations of the Brown Act. The Brown Act allows the public to have discourse on all of the issues. And the Brown Act protects that. Luckily, we found a lawyer that could support us in that regard. And over the course of the negotiations, it was clear that everything was done to hide the sale of the process from the public. And if we lose this case, it weakens the Brown Act. It weakens it for everyone. It weakens it, the ability of all residents to have a say in the decision-making process with public officials across the state. So we put in our time and our money. Of course, the lawyer put in a lot of pro bono time too. Hopefully she'll get some money. And this is where we stand at this particular time. But if you note some of the original figures that were given to the Voice of LA were my son, who was tracking the donations through everybody Artie Moreno knew to the council members to manipulate the votes. And this is all part of the illicit process. And we're still looking to move. Well, I'm sneaking this in now. We'd still like to see Artie out. And of course, we want the Anaheim Angels back. And there's the beginning. David, you take it from there. We're the People's Homeless Task Force. We brought suit. We stopped the sale until the FBI could block it completely. And that's where we are today. Dave, take it away.
Thanks, Mike. Great segue. Thank you. So in meeting with one of our attorneys today, actually, just before this meeting, I can give you the most recent updates. But as Michael had mentioned, this has been a long time in coming, from op-eds that have been written to speaking at city council meetings on a regular basis, every meeting, writing letters to city council, and being interviewed by news media because of things that we presented or issues of concern that they recognize that People's Homeless Task Force was involved with. That being said, currently, everything has been filed, not everything, but the proceeding, the application, if you will, because I'm not an attorney, so I may use some wrong terminology, but the application for the appeal has been submitted. The next step is something that's called the designation of record that's upcoming. That will be next to be filed, and that is possibly within the next 60 days or so. Then it goes to back and forth where there's some arguments from the city, arguments from our council, and it goes back and forth a little bit. And then with the impacted schedule of the appeal court, then we get fit into a trial date. And currently it's estimated to be months away, maybe 6 months or 9 months away. So we don't know, they don't know, they being the attorneys. So there's still a lot to go. The good news in that is that gives entities like the FBI and other agencies and individuals that are currently investigating time to do more digging, time to find more, my words, evidence that there's been some wrongdoing. And all of that certainly we're hoping will be beneficial to the appeal. And as Mike said, you know, if the appeal fails, or if then that really damages the whole state. It damages it because elected officials, be it county supervisors or city council members or whatever, anybody who's responsible to comply with the Brown Act may then be free to conduct business without transparency. They may be free to conduct business in a more corrupt fashion. So this is more than important. And for those in the room who aren't aware, People's Homeless Task Force is never ever sued for any financial gain. And we're not expecting any, not a penny. This is on a lawsuit on principle alone. So it's really important. I don't know how I can emphasize the fact that everybody, whether you live in Anaheim or Buena Park or Chula Vista, this is impactful to all residents in California. So I'm going to do a very selfish thing, and I'm going to post in the chat People's Homeless Task Force a donation link that is specific to the appeal fund that we're trying to boost up. So even if it's, you know, something that you can help out with, that'd be great. Or if you know other people who may be able to help out with, that would be great. But who knows, maybe you'll win lotto and help us out with that. So I'm going to put in a link.
David, I think that's really, a helpful perspective, and, to understand that a little bit better, because I know I was certainly questioning the appeal given that the sale is dead, and to, better understand why you're moving forward with the appeal.
Yeah.
But, I'm kind of, also wondering, with the new information that has come out, since that decision, are there other things we should be looking at that might have been Brown Act violations that have been, voted on over the past 4 years, and looking at the Angels, at the beginning, I talked about, their lease extension or their lease reinstatement in January of 2019. Is it possible that that was a Brown Act violation itself, and that, the Angels really don't have, shouldn't have a valid lease and instead should be, homeless, mid-season here?
Right. No, that's a really good question. And I know that there's many of the people that are in the room. I know Mike for sure, and Vern and others, who've attended city council meetings on a regular basis. And if they couldn't attend during COVID, we at least watched it from our living rooms and tried to participate in that way after submitting letters to the city council. So there's plenty of, my words, documentation and plenty of evidence that we think Brown Act violations over the years have certainly occurred. And I'll give one example. It's been alleged because of what we saw, that the mayor was instrumental in how Steve Fessel voted on one issue, things of that sort, right in front of our eyes, like, so yeah, we think there's more, but nothing that this council has done, in my opinion, is as egregious as this. Part one, taking the city's largest asset and basically giving it away. Part one. Part two is with a lawsuit again, and not to restate it, but I think it's that important that this can affect every single resident in the state if we're not successful, the attorneys aren't successful.
Jose, can you relay what you said in chat just now about the time limits on the Brown Act?
Yeah, and I don't remember if it's 30 or 90 days, so my apologies for that, but there is a very limited window when Brown Act violations can be challenged in the courts. And in fact, the lawsuit that we're under now barely made that window. So I'm really appreciative of the amount of pro bono work that was done just to get that going by the attorney. So that at the very least, again, a decision, even though I'm a part of the council and part of the defendants, I guess, as a city in name, it's a lawsuit that seeks to make sure that the people know what really happened. And I think we all should support that. And but I guess I want to speak to direct this idea that you put out, which I think is a really important one about, well, if we know that they were working in unison, they brazenly were doing it. It was common knowledge amongst different folks in the who's who of Anaheim in politics. They knew that in order to get a project considered or to get favored nation status, we might say, with this council, you needed to contribute to not just Harry's campaign, but you needed to hire certain lobbyists to consult for you. The Sunkist Plaza is a prime example of that, where the Jaeger House restaurant is. That project was not necessarily getting a lot of support, I would say, politically from all the powers that be in Anaheim. Sandy, the owner, was doing a nice job of reminding people of the historic nature of that place. And then the developer hired Jeff Litt, and they just flipped just like that, and pointed that out during the public hearing. On the stadium deal itself, actually, or any other deals, because there's also a lot of development projects that have been approved. You started the conversation about the gas station project in the hills, where we got hundreds of emails from residents saying, we desperately need this gas station up here. And the Planning Commission supported it, and so did staff. But it turns out that the person who appealed it happens to be a good friend and contributed to Harry Sadu, even though Harry denied it up at the dais that he knew the appellant. We now know that wasn't true. So the hope, if any, is that through an FBI investigation, and if this lawsuit's able to continue to gather information through depositions, potentially under oath or whatnot, that the city attorney has confirmed that if Harry was working in this way with Angels Baseball when we voted to restore the lease for them, to reinstate the lease, that could be nullified, because if there is nefarious or illegal activity happening, quid pro quos or any of that nature, that has a 4-year statute. So we could, and I'm hoping the city council will move in this direction. So we'll need everybody's support to push our city attorney to say, let's get whatever evidence we can from the FBI. Let's request it. How deep did this go, and how far did it go, and for how long? And let's review every project to see if it was a function of quid pro quo, illegal and unethical practices. And I think a lot of things may be undone in the city, in particular this one. And just a quick reminder, Grant, it wasn't just that he re-encumbered the land and an extension of the lease, which they misled us with at that time. We had to clarify that some months later, that no, they reinstated the lease, not just an extension. That single vote cost the city of Anaheim hundreds of millions of dollars just on that single vote because they re-encumbered the land for an additional 20 years or 18 years. Re-encumbered, give it full control back to Artie. And so that's what was really most egregious about that vote. And then last thing, just as to add on while I have the mic a bit, is that the day of the vote, the per acreage sale was 2.1 million, as Wally was saying, half of what other properties around were selling. But that day, we actually got a memo, or the day before, from Howard Knowles Group, who have proposed, with city council support previously, to build a performing arts center, state of the art, the best of its class, to compete with major cities. They offered 2.4 million per acre just for the stadium, the Grove area, the 12 acres. So they were offering $300,000 more per acre, and the council didn't even bat an eye. They wouldn't even stop to think, well, wait a sec, might that be a better deal for the city overall, in addition to the value of the land itself? It wasn't even given the time of day. So it's not like we didn't have other offers.
Yeah, that's I didn't realize that Dr. Knowles Group had actually submitted that proposal, and I see that he's here tonight, so I'm happy to see that he's still engaged, and I hope this gives new light to that project that he's been working on for so many years. But Jose, I kind of want to go back to you for a sec here. You mentioned that there's was no discussion in closed session amongst the Cabal council members. Do you think that there was discussion outside of public meetings? Or do you think that the council members just understood that they were supposed to, vote with the mayor without discussion?
I think that when one reviews the video on such a huge deal of consequence, and that for months and months, and I showed this at the last council meeting, 9 times I tried to agendize a discussion of the appraisal, to sunshine the appraisal, to have a 30-day window for the public to review whatever final proposal was going to be made, to discuss the community benefits. And 9 times they said no to agendizing. They set up those rules. So one can only, I think, come to the conclusion that with such a complex deal, and they had no substantive questions, then that means that they were talking about it somewhere. They processed the deal somewhere. And staff does debrief council members on the negotiating team does, but that staff got it so perfect in the negotiation. They got it so perfect that there was no amendment made to the proposal whatsoever. And we didn't discuss it in depth in any way in closed session. I'll say that we did not. Very limited. And when we started moving that direction, the city attorney, as I said back then, was good at putting us back on task. But we did give direction to go from a lease to a sale. But without discussion of that nature, where was that discussion happening? That 5 of the members had no substantive questions that day. It's amazing. Avelino Valencia said it well when he said, and he's quoted as saying, we discussed more the details of a 7-Eleven than we did the stadium deal. We argued more and discussed the substantive nature of having Indigenous Peoples Day in October than we did the Angels deal. We discussed the flag for Anaheim more in detail than we did the Angels deal. So to answer your question again, yes, unless they're telepathic, they were having substantial conversations somewhere else, or somebody else was, and then gave them the script of how to vote.
Is there any sort of investigation in the city to look at, kind of the city staff's actions, in support of, the mayor, and, if they had any knowledge of, Brown Act violations or other violations of law that went into, these decisions?
Yes. At council meeting on Tuesday, we're going to get a presentation of RFPs to contract an independent firm to investigate on 2 fronts. One is an investigation on whether any city staff participated in, engaged in, or supported illegal or unethical processes here. So there'll be that. And then the other investigation is to do a financial audit what's called a forensic audit of contracts given out by the city to donors to campaigns of the council. So we've expanded it. I asked for it to be expanded from just the mayor to the council. That can allow us to see not just who's getting these contracts, but also is the money going where it's supposed to go? And that's one of the things we learned with the FBI investigation is Todd Mann was getting money from his clients and laundering them to then put in his bank account to buy these $1 million properties. Who's to say that the Anaheim First money, $250,000, a piece of that didn't go into the Anaheim Chamber PAC, which is illegal, or that it didn't go into his pocket or for fancy dinners at restaurants to host and strategize with the family that they call themselves. So that's really important to understand too. Is did the money actually go for what it was meant to go when we were contracted? Again, we gave $6.5 million to visit Anaheim during COVID. We still have no real accounting of what was done with that money. We don't know. So yes, that's happening, and presumably will be voted on Tuesday to hire a firm or two firms.
That's great to hear, and I certainly hope that moves forward and that everybody here supports that on Tuesday. So I want to kind of switch topics again, to my favorite one of affordable housing. The stadium site was, and you're going to have almost 500 units of affordable homes on the site under the sale. I think it was 433 or something like that. And the city is required by the state to build about 6,000 low and very low income homes over the next 8 years. Without the sale moving forward and without those, 433, units on the stadium site, where are we going to put those in the city? And that's really a question for all three of you. How do we meet those low income housing needs that the city has without this sale, without the units on the site, or without the money that would be coming from the sale? Wally, do you have any ideas about how we can do that?
Well, that is a question that every city in California is trying to figure out, because they're all, needed to submit something to the state on where they're going to build additional residential units. And I think they just have to say that we're going to zone property so that can be done. Doesn't actually have to get built. They have to just show that it can be built. So there's a lot of commercial properties that can be zoned multi-use. For example, all these shopping centers and retail spaces, a lot of them could be changed to just change the zoning to multi-use, so you can build retail on the first floor and 2 or 3 levels of residential above. That's one way of getting the state requirement taken care of. I don't see the stadium helping that much towards that need, unfortunately. But other than just a lot of zone changing to allow mixed use, I think is the answer all over the whole city.
Well, I know in the revised draft of the city's housing element, which is the document that shows what you're talking about, where the housing will go, to meet that need, or where it can go to meet that need. They've taken out the stadium site. It was released earlier this month, so they've taken out the stadium site, but they still include a lot of, for instance, there's a project up here in Anaheim Hills at the Festival Shopping Center that was proposed a couple of years ago for 600 units, but the developer there has pulled it back. They're not proposing that anymore, but it's still in our housing element, meeting 600 units of need, and that's just not going to happen because the landowner isn't proposing that anymore. And I think that there's a lot of places like that throughout the city where the likelihood of the developments ever happening is zero. And if that's the case, then the city can't count it, even though we're trying. So I expect we will get a comment letter back from HCD, the State Department of Housing and Community Development, that will reject our revised draft housing element. So I think we're still going to have this question of where it goes. I don't know. Councilmember Moreno, do you have anything? You kind of have a look on your face of disappointment and concern.
It is. It's just all. It's a great question to engage in, because that's how they tried to spin the benefit of this deal. At the beginning, it was, look, $128 million, $124 million to build 466 low-income affordable housing units integrated into the project. There were going to be 5,000 units built overall. And for 124 million, we're going to get 466 units over 25 years. And our public information office and our city manager, our current one, called it an unprecedented commitment to affordable housing, to build 466 units in 25 years. Just hyperbole to the max. So when HCD came down and gave their notice of violation, magically, somehow, in the stipulated judgment, the city made the argument with a straight face that with $27 million, we're going to build 466 units on the stadium site. With a straight face, they said this. And when we asked, well, how did you figure that math out? And they said, with the other $96 million fine, that's kind of a fine, but not really a fine. We're paying it because we don't agree that we're guilty, kind of thing, the weird thing. $96 million, we're going to build up to 1,000 units. And well, wait, how does the math work? And what they said is that we're going to be able to get matching state credits, matching state density bonuses, and all this stuff. And I thought, well, why didn't we get that 2 years ago and give 27 million towards affordable housing to get the 500 units? Why did he need 124? The conundrum for those of us who advocate for housing, affordable housing in particular, is that it sounds really good. Like, wow, this deal was going to produce potentially 1,000 affordable housing units throughout the city. But when you look at the housing element, the areas that are the most highlighted, there's 17,000 units we're saying we need to build, that we need in the next 8 years, 6,000 of those low income. And when you look at the map, Anaheim's quite a segregated city economically, quite segregated. And when you look at where the housing opportunities for affordable housing, it's already in high dense areas of our city. So my concern at the time, and still is that that property, if it was developed out, was going to basically say that with the Platinum Triangle, when Kurt Pringle pushed that through, 18,000 units that are permitted there, not one designated for affordable housing. Now we're talking 23,000 housing units in the Platinum Triangle, the Stadium District, without affordable housing to them. That's a complete segregation of our city. And the jobs there were going to be 45,000 total jobs, permanent jobs, at an average wage of $65,000. So the average worker getting this job, because we're promised these jobs, we're automatically going to be eligible for affordable housing. And we're only going to build 400. That creates a stress on the entire social system of Anaheim, not to mention Garden Grove, Santa Ana, and Orange, our surrounding cities, because many of those folks will end up having to live there.
Yeah.
So that's the conundrum.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I will say that tax credits, which are one of the biggest funding sources for affordable housing, the way they're scored has changed this year, which will make it much easier to build affordable housing in places where it's been difficult in the past. In Anaheim Hills, in parts of the rest of Anaheim that the HCD calls high resourced areas, which tend to be also the segregated areas, the wealthy areas. So I think we will start to see that change. I hope, as long as the city gets behind those changes that the state is pushing in. Mike, I see your hand up. You have something you want to add to this?
When the People's Homeless Task Force took on this battle with Artie Moreno, we saw one object. I think we discussed it many times, and that is that we're going to look for the land to be sold for the proper price, which is $1 billion. And we're going to look for them to build the affordable housing into the project, which should be 15% of whatever they build there. So we should be talking about 750 units. That's something we discussed, and that's another reason why we're pressing for this. Certainly, we need the money to pay down our debt in Anaheim, and we need the affordable housing. That's exactly how we pictured it, and we were hoping that that's how it would move forward if we could stop this and come back to the table. Simple as that.
Yeah, I think, unlike what has happened in the Platinum Triangle, we need to see some affordable housing on that site, on the stadium side, when it gets developed. And, hopefully we see some affordable housing on the remaining, property that hasn't been developed within the Platinum Triangle, within the rest of it. So I think that's a great segue to kind of bring us to our kind of final pieces of this discussion, and that's what the future is. And, Wally, I want to start with you. You started, talking about it a little bit earlier, but, if a master developer owned 150 acres in the heart of Orange County, what would they do with it?
Well, when we were back arguing about the value on the appraisal and the deal, I actually went to quote unquote a master developer and I said to them, here's what's proposed to be built on the stadium site. After entitlements, how much would someone like you pay for that? And he said, at least $1 billion. So my idea would be, why is the city letting a developer, Artie Moreno or whoever is going to do it, make that profit? Why doesn't the city be the developer? Maybe they can sell the stadium to the Angels. Maybe they can sell a corner piece to a hotel builder. Maybe they can sell the land next to the George for $4 million an acre to another guy who wants to build apartments. So to answer your question, the master developer is going to do what was being proposed, a hotel and some apartments and some retail and work around the stadium. But it seems to me that the city should be the ones doing the entitlements and taking advantage of the value increase after the entitlements are there. Why just give it away to a developer and let them make the profit? Being proposed, something like that.
And if the city did that, if the city, entitled it and broke it up into pieces, could the city then retain parts of it, put in a park, retain some land for, to lease to affordable housing developers, or sell it to affordable housing developers, or, put in, make room for a school, or, ensure that there, one of the parcels that gets sold has, a grocery store, since there's not a single grocery store, in the Platinum Triangle, those sorts of things. Could the city ensure that that happens through that process?
That's probably a question for Jose, I think.
The city could, and that's where it takes it back to just, again, the egregious nature of the corruption that we've seen through our political process and campaign contributions. Is what I've learned over the last few years, and I've asked this at council meetings, is a developer will purchase what was a commercial real estate property, for example, or a sliver of land, and they'll buy it. Then they'll go through the entitlement process, and it's almost assured, given that they've got the votes, that as Todd Ament said, we have control of the council, hire us and we'll get you what you need, which is what happened at Sunkist Plaza. And now when it's entitled for housing, my understanding right now in real estate is that housing makes land worth a lot more when you entitle it, especially for I forget the term, the mixed use has a lot more value as land. So what these developers are doing, we saw it on the corner of Lincoln and Euclid. We saw it over on Water Street and East, huge 600 units, townhome condos, is Shop Off Realty buys this land, and then they flip it once they get it entitled through really what's become a political process. I mean, staff does their work, but ultimately it's about the votes. So they get the land rezoned and entitled for multi-use or for housing, and now the land's worth a lot more. And now affordable housing developers who would like to buy that perhaps and play in that game can't afford to buy that land now or lease it because it's worth so much more now because it's been entitled. So I think the idea of the city proactively beginning to look at rezoning and entitling spaces and saying that parts of it will require affordability to them, along with amenities, is I think would be a forward-thinking way to go about assuring that developers are all bidding under the same conditions for the land, and let's see what proposals are there to maximize the opportunities for residents that live here, or that want to live here, along with those who already live here.
Grant, I just want to give a time check. It's 7
Yeah, I see it. And thank you, Jorge. And I think that's a great place to kind of stop this part of it. But I want to take a couple minutes and open it up to anybody else who has questions. We have maybe take 10 minutes to do some additional questions before we wrap it up for the evening. And so I am going to call on people as I see hands come up. Probably only have time for 2, 3, maybe 4 if you are quick.
Yes,
So
please use the raise your hand feature, and we'll keep to 1 question per person first. And like Grant said, please try to keep it to a short
Janine,
question.
I can't go back to it.
Grant, I actually thought we were going till 7:30, so I'm cool till 7:30. If I could be here till 7:30 if you all want to extend it.
I was signing
There's
up.
interest.
No, you can't sign up.
Wally, David, does that work for you?
Yes, I can stay.
Okay. Then we'll have more time for questions. So I'm going to start with Danette. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Danette, and I had a question about the Brown Act lawsuit. I'm assuming that's in the process, and someone had mentioned in the chat that there's a limit, like a statute of limitations. Can you just explain kind of where it is in the process right now? And I think I might have missed that part. Sorry.
Hi, Danette, Dave. Yes, we did in fact already go to court regarding the Brown Act. And frankly, we were unsuccessful. The judge ruled that the city, in his infinite wisdom or ignorance, one of the two, my words, decided that the city of Anaheim did nothing wrong, that they were very transparent and did not violate the Brown Act. That's what brought us to filing for the appeal, because shortly after that decision, I don't know if you remember, the mayor was claiming, that there was no problem, everything was good, et cetera, et cetera. Then the FBI got involved and issued some reports. And with that information, we felt more than energized to go ahead and file the appeal to overturn the judge's decision initially. And that's where we are right now.
David, can I ask a kind of follow-up question to that? Something I was wondering about. In an appeal, can you introduce new evidence? All the FBI stuff came out after the decision, the original decision came out. Can you now add that FBI information to the appeal?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. I like the one-word answer too.
Yeah.
Mark, why don't you go ahead with your question?
Yes, thank you, Grant. I just wonder if there's any way, like in the case of the plaza that with Los Amigos and the rest of the businesses that were there, Rosalinda, and can they recoup some kind of loss because of the fact that this was done under false pretenses? And the minute Jeff Flint was brought in, I think any project that Jeff Flint was involved with should be voided. And is there any way of a recourse for the owners of those businesses at the plaza?
Does anybody have a sense of that?
So, Mark, I'm sorry. So the core of the question is, can that decision be revisited?
It sounded like the question was, the businesses that were tenants at the plaza can, they try to recoup any losses if it was a fraudulent decision to approve that project, and which led to their businesses shutting down.
That's a great question. I don't know about the tenants per se, but certainly the owner. We know that there's the owner can then look to question, but at the end it was a private land deal where it was sold to a developer. And so if the developer then got their, the new owners, if they got their plans approved through a nefarious process, then yeah, that entitlement that was given to them can be nullified if indeed it was through nefarious activities, illegal activities of quid pro quos or undue influence to council members before the hearing, because it's a public hearing. You're not supposed to engage in making any determinations on the case before the hearing itself. So presumably the entitlement can be nullified. I don't know about the redress for the tenants who are leasing out of the property.
Vern, do you have a question?
Yeah, I went to the 5th District, the District 5 community meeting last night. I was hoping to see my councilman, Steve Fessel, but he wasn't there. But there was a lady giving a report on the budget, and she had this this nice little 8-page booklet, and it talks about how we're doing so well because we have 1.5 million fans at the Angel Stadium for the season. And I asked her, well, what kind of revenue does that translate into? How much do we get from that? And relatedly, getting any money from Artie for the lease, what lease is he covered by right now? I guess those are two different things, but it's about the present. How much money are we getting from the Angels?
Yeah, Wally, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I'm going to back up again. Back when Disney sold the team to Artie Moreno, back when Disney helped to renovate the stadium, Disney said, we'll pay X to renovate the stadium in exchange for us getting all the ticket revenue up to 2.6 million people, all the parking lot revenue, all the concession revenue. And the city said, okay, as long as you put Anaheim in the name. So even though you'll have somebody like Tom Morton tell you that we've got prepaid rent and we already got the prepaid rent, no is the answer. The city today is not getting any rent from Artie Moreno. A long story short, that's the answer. No, we're not getting rent from Artie Moreno.
And a future council do something about that?
Well, the current lease isn't back intact, and that's what that lease says, that everything went back the way it was, and he's not paying rent.
Yeah, I think he pays something if he hits above certain ticket sales and
over
certain
2.6 million. We get like $2 a ticket or something.
Yeah,
over a certain number of parking spaces, but it turns out to be next to nothing, and we're obligated to, I think, $600,000 a year for maintenance, and that it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we're accurate in the way we're describing it.
I am accurate. We get zero.
Yeah. Yes. Dr. Knoll, I had seen your hand up, but it got put down. So do you have a question? No. Okay. I'm going to go on to Mike Ortega. Do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity here to kind of have an open Q&A with some of the leaders that really led the fight here. I had a open-ended question, a little bit directed to Dr. Moreno, but I think folks should chime in who are locals and Anaheim residents. What should our relationship as community leaders, as community members be with Artie Moreno, with Angels baseball? What's next? I'm a believer in consequences, right? So, coming out of these revelations, it sounds like there should be some kind of penalization, right? And some kind of consequences that come out of it. I know there's a lot of open-ended questions. You guys are proceeding with an appeal in your case. But in terms of political contributions, in terms of a political presence, you know, I think there's an example to be made here, but definitely wanted to hear the opinions of you all that helped in the fight.
Well, from my perspective, it relates to Artie Moreno. He did what he does. He's not a nonprofit. He's not a charity. He's a for-profit entity. As much as we like to think baseball is a nonprofit, feel-good enterprise that's really to create happiness for us, like Disneyland, it exists to make money. And that's why Artie has gone from buying the team at 175 million to now being valued at over 2 billion. So it's an investment. So that he tried to get the best that he could for himself, I don't begrudge it, frankly. I think he could have been a better corporate citizen. He could have been more engaged with us the way that the Samuelis have been and the Anaheim Ducks and the Honda Center. But that's his choice to do or not to. It's all on us. We're the city negotiators. We're the ones that's supposed to look out for the public interest. We're elected with that trust. So that's why for me, the policy levers here are about regulating ourselves. If Artie wants to play in that way, and he wants to try to control our elections by giving money to his preferred candidates, then we will not be able to vote on his projects. And so it has to be a project that has its merits to it and not just based on political contributions and influence. So, so Mike, for me right now, at least, I'm focusing in that direction. You know, I don't begrudge the Angels. I'll be really honest with you. I don't like that they take us for granted. But I also cannot escape the fact that our city, our public information office beat the drums for this deal more so than the Angels did, I would argue. They were talking about the benefits and the beauty and the greatness of this deal before we even saw it and before we voted on it. And that's not the role of a public information office. So that's on us as a city and political and administrative leadership. Artie Moreno should, of course, be trying to be a partner with us. And I think for them, they could look at the model of the Samuelis and the Honda Center and the Ducks. They have been good partners for our city.
Mayor Tate, thank you for joining us tonight. Do you have a question or anything else you would like to say, since you've been, you know, deep in the trenches of this whole thing for many years?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, thanks, Grant, and thank. By the way, this is my first Democratic Club meeting, so thank you all for allowing this Republican to join you. And I see a lot of names on this, and so many of you were in the trenches fighting this the self-proclaimed cabal for years in writing and speaking before council, and just not being able to stand what you're seeing. So thank you for that. Maybe kind of more comments and questions, because but first I'd like to say I think it's critical that the city have a mayor, and I think it's critical that mayor be somebody who has credibility and independence and courage, and it's important. I mean, it's a different thing, and maybe official. You know, maybe the official powers are not that different from a council member or mayor pro tem, but the mayor has the bully pulpit, and the city desperately needs leadership, because I think this is a really critical time in our history, and it is, and obviously it should be Dr. Jose Moreno. It's such a obvious choice, and I don't know if the council will do it or not, but it's important. And I see Denise chiming in. Yes, she agrees. Jose is there. He's been there on the ground, and Denise and I were there before fighting this stuff. But Jose and Jose's been fighting this for a long time. He's there. So these answers, I think the city is in a much better shape or position to get a fair deal, which is what we're all looking for, right? Because it's our city, it all belongs to us, and it's our city's largest asset. We're looking for a fair deal, and Jose would understand what that is. So anyway, I've got a bunch of thoughts on this and where we are today. You know, one is that we have, and Grant, thanks for bringing up that December or January 19th reinstatement of the lease. And the way I'd like to the way I like to think of that, I go, imagine if your family, let's say you inherited this $100 million mansion and in Newport Beach or something, and you inherited it, but it has this lease on it that was signed 20 years ago, and you get nothing for rent, and the lease goes on for another 20 years, and you would be, well, it doesn't do you any good. You don't make any money off of it, and then you get a notice from the tenant saying we want to terminate this lease, and you would do backflips at that point. And that's what happened in December, our last month as mayor, when they sent that notice, which coincided with Harry Sadu's campaign of Save the Angels. But they did something really dumb on their part, and they canceled they canceled that lease. And then what we did is we put it on the agenda and accepted it, and then we asked for an appraisal of it now without the Angel lease on it, which, by the way, Jose was talking about that, and we never got, even though we asked for it, and we never got it. City people never got it. So anyway, so you get this notice, you're doing backflips, you go, now I could sell it for $100 million. I could lease it out for tens of millions of dollars a year. You'd be doing backflips, and then all of a sudden you find out that your crazy brother, who's the executor, just reinstated that lease for nothing, for no rent for another 20 years. And then you see him riding away on a motorcycle or something. You'd be so livid, right? So that's where the big value. And while you mentioned billions of dollars, no one talked about the value of the stadium. No one talked about that. But the value of the stadium and the land, I think, are maybe billions of dollars. And that dropped from there to 300 million the moment he reinstated that lease. So anyway, now I think that should be looked at, and whether that was done properly, whether there's any shenanigans going on with that. So I know I'm going on too long, but at the very least, if they don't overturn, they should look at that existing lease and say, you know what, Anaheim should be the name of the team. That's what the city got, that 96 lease. But also the Angels need to keep that stadium up in first class shape as a first class stadium, and they haven't been. And the city should say, you know what, as landlord, you need to do that and do it now. And get, I think, Jose, maybe you guys want to get an expert architect and say, what's it going to take to bring it up? And I think the Angels, that needs to be presented to the Angels and say, you know what, get started and fix this up as a first class stadium. I think that's one of the things. That's section 10 of the lease. But anyway, I've gone forever. See if I have any questions. No, I really want to get out about Dr. Jose Moreno. It's critical, and I think for the council to vote against him, he's the only person up there who isn't tied to this stuff. So he's the only credible, independent person, I think, who could take that job. Hey, thanks, Wayne. Appreciate you all being interested in this, and thanks for everybody on here has been fighting this for the people.
Thank you very much, Mayor Tate, for kind of all you did to try to prevent this from happening in the first place. And it's great to hear your perspective. And I think everybody here probably agrees that Jose is the perfect person to be mayor for the next 6 months. So you would be termed out anyway. So
right.
Unfortunately, but we'll get Al in there to replace you. I don't even know if Al has gotten the endorsement yet, but I'm just going to assume he has.
Yeah.
Grant, I think I see Jackie has had her button up for a while, so I don't know if you mean you have your hand up or if that was an accident, but I just wanted to recognize that.
I will get there, but first, Howard Knoll, I see your hand is back up. So do you have a question?
Not so much a question, Grant, but I'd like to thank you for allowing me to participate. And I want to thank you for supporting the Anaheim Performing Arts Center Foundation in the past. I would just like everybody to know that our foundation is still active and we are pursuing our mission of building the Performing Arts Center on that 12 acres that we made the offer for, as Jose intimated, for $2.4 million, which was never even considered by the city council. We never received an answer. And as you and some of the others may know, we did have an exclusive negotiating agreement for 2 years with the city of Anaheim to build that Performing Arts Center. And within that agreement, we pursued and performed every obligation that we had. And when it came to the city's obligation of giving us leasing or sales terms, they failed to do that, and then they terminated the lease. So we're going to pursue every recourse that we have, but I just want everybody to know that we still intend to bring the Anaheim Performing Arts Center to Anaheim. We intend to generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for the city of Anaheim, create at least 1,000 jobs, most of them, or a good deal of them, 6-figure jobs. So I think one of the mistakes we made in the past is not getting our mission out to as many people as we could, so that there's just a small number of people in the city of Anaheim who even have the basic understanding of what we were trying to do. So we're going to try and correct that in the ensuing months, and we're going to be very active. And I can tell you this, you'll hear a lot more from us in the next couple of weeks.
That's great to hear. I certainly, want to see it move forward. And, one of the things I'm happy about with, the termination of the sale is that it, allows that Performing Arts Center, to possibly move forward. So thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you. I'm going to take one more question. Steve White has his hand up. So, and then I'll turn it back over to Jorge for some, final remarks and announcements. So, Steve, take the last question here.
Yes. I have a question. The cabal and the mayor certainly had the assistance of, they didn't act on their own. My question,
Just
Dr.
put on the chat that having the Performing Arts Center would be good for the entire city.
Yeah.
No,
Dr. Knoll, yeah, let's let Wes sorry, Steve finish up his question.
Good now?
Yeah, go ahead,
Okay.
Steve.
I'm wondering whether what's being done to look into collusion on the part of upper city management in promoting the not only the stadium sale, but the past record. You mentioned the public information office. It's kind of a small guy when the city manager attended cabal meetings. That's my question. How do we rectify that? How do we hold those who assisted accountable?
So, Dr. Brandon, I think that was for you.
So how do we hold the council accountable? I think the point that I'm learning through all of this is that at the end of the day, Harry Sadoud consistently got 5 votes. And if they're working in lockstep, maybe they were not taking quid pro quos, but in campaign, many of you know, it's implicit. It's, hey, I'd like to talk to you about my project. Oh, that's great. I'll see you at my fundraiser next week. Let's talk about it some more. And that's how you start to create this pay to play culture. It is undoubtable to me that 5 members of the council were in lockstep.
Please spell Howard Knoll's last name.
We're on just about on lockstep with just about every single issue. Every single issue. All you gotta do is match the campaign contributions of the resort interest SOAR, of the Chamber of Commerce, and the Police Association, and you'll see lockstep voting, including Avelino Valencia, with the exception of the stadium, which he wasn't present for, but he certainly was really helpful in pushing that issue after. But other than that, they've been lockstep. So that's why for me, I asked for the investigation to be not just about the mayor, it's about all of us, all of us. We all, I shouldn't say we, they have a cloud over them. There's a cloud over those contributions and what they ended up, how they ended up directing our city in ways that we now know just really eroded our local democracy, frankly. Our democracy has been eroded in ways that we see at the national level, and that's what's so frustrating at the local level. I don't know if that answers your question directly, but I do think that anyone named in this FBI investigation, and if anyone watching the votes, Harry was not alone. There was a script, and they all followed it.
Yeah, I think that has been readily apparent for years now. I mean, literally a script. Harry was reading from a piece of paper for most of his comments. So I think that wraps it up today. So everybody, thank you very much for coming. I want to thank our panelists for being here and contributing tonight. This was a great discussion. Unfortunately, it was for not the greatest reasons, but I'm glad we can come together and talk about what's going on and the future of our city. So everybody, thank you for your questions. Thank you for your participation. And Jorge, I'll send it back over to you.
Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Grant, for facilitating. We hope that this is the beginning of the conversation and involvement. So we have our next general meeting. If you wish to join us, it's going to be our first hybrid meeting in person and via Zoom, which will be July 7th at 7 p.m. and we will announce our location. But if you want to join us and have a casual conversation, we will be having a social on June 30th at 6 o'clock in Bruheim. I will be putting that in the chat. Thank you again to Fred, who spearheaded this. This is the accumulation of your efforts. Marisol for coordinating our guest speakers. Thank you for Lindsay for running tech, Patrika for moderating the chat, and thank you most of all to Grant for facilitating this amazing conversation. Thank you, Dr. Moreno, Wally, David, Mike. I also saw Denise Barnes here, former council member Vanderbilt, and Mayor Tate. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful night. We hope to see you, if not at our next general meeting, then for sure for a beer, hopefully.